I have to break these videos up into two because of the risk that they're not recording. So we just sort of talked there about the empty chair experiment or technique. We also talked about Fritz Perls and Gloria in their therapeutic interview, and how that that session really demonstrates all the different self-awareness type objectives of the therapist. So the key principles are around here and now, which we've talked about a lot. So the Gestalt philosophy is that the past is gone and the future may never arise, and so we may learn to live in and fully experience the present. Many people focus on past, remembering mistakes and fantasizing and anticipating the future and making endless plans, and that's actually normal. It's a normal part of human existence, is to daydream. It's part of what our consciousness does. There's even been research to say that we need to do that in order to stop the intensity of the here and now. But what Gestalt is saying is that when you enter therapy and you focus on the here and now, what's going to bubble up is the unfinished business. And that's why it's important in a therapeutic environment. So here are some elements of Gestalt therapy. We listen for language and observe the body language. The therapist determines whether the client's words match their feelings, and so we challenge them if the words do not match. And it would have been good to show you the video with Gloria, but there he says quite often to her, "Why are you smiling when you're angry? Why do you do that?" And it challenges her. She says, "I'm not doing that." She says, "Well, I'm shy." Kind of comes up with all these different ways of trying to explain her behavior, but what it comes down to is that she's being inauthentic. And when you're being inauthentic, it means that you're hiding something. What are you hiding? Well, probably your unfinished business, your true feelings. We personalize all the language, so the client is encouraged to own their experience by personalizing the language. So the client often says it or you rather than I, so we stop themselves from doing that. They do that to depersonalize the experience. So it feels terrible, right? And so what we want them to do is to say, "I feel terrible. I feel this is happening. I, and we do that in an effort to have the client realize that they are at the center of their life. It's no one else's life. They're at the center of it. And how are they going to use this new accountability to move ahead? We change questions into statements. So some clients ask questions to keep feelings hidden and safe. "Why do I always feel like this?" says the client. And we want to change that, because that's kind of removing it from themselves, isn't it? It's like the feeling is sort of out there. "Why do I always feel that?" No, we get them to say, "I'm not sure why I feel like this." And so they own it. It's all about this self-awareness, ownership. And of course, awareness. The inner zone, which is the body, the outer, me and the environment, and the middle, which is, what are my thoughts? What are my cognitions? And so again and again, you need to remember that Gestalt therapy is all about awareness, getting our client to experience self-awareness. Questions in the here and now are there to improve the awareness. So Gestalt therapists help clients stay in the present by asking present-focused questions. There won't be any sense of, "Tell me all about what happened with your father. Tell me all about what happened, when that happened to you." It's going to be, what is happening for you now when you think about it? What are you experiencing now? And if you remember in the little video that we watched with the empty chair, well, he says, "How do you feel now?" After the client had encountered his angry part, how do you feel now? What are you experiencing now? How are you experiencing your fear? How are you attempting to withdraw from it? No why, just what and how. They focus on the body expression. Is a common experiment. So the aim of this experiment is to develop self-awareness of what client is saying or experiencing with their body. So for example, the client asks, what are you aware of or experiencing in the here and now? And the counsellor gives the body parts voices. So we focus on the body expression by saying, well, what would your eyes say? Or what is your heart saying? Which kind of makes more sense, or is probably more relatable, isn't it? Can you carry out a conversation between your left and right hand? And I have actually done these sort of experiments with clients where I get them to write things with their left hand and then to answer with their right hand. So it's like the left and right are having a conversation about the problem. So we're looking to isolate kind of parts of themselves that might be holding, kind of different unfinished business. And how do we bring that up? How do we bring that up? Just thinking of different experiments to use in order to bring them up. And then experiments. So experiments are used, and when I say experiments, I also mean techniques. So experiments are used to reveal the client's internal conflict. So creative enactments of problems or situations of client intensify the client's experience. So the client's issues are experienced as if they're happening in the present. That's what experiments are for. They are to get your client to feel right now they're feeling. We're not talking about it. We're not imagining that it happened back then and how did it feel back then. We're not going into the future. How is it going to... We're not actually kind of constructing any therapy around the thoughts of it. We want to experience it, and that's what Gestalt therapy is about, fundamentally. So, what are some contributions that Gestalt therapy has made? We work with clients from their own cultural, social, psychosocial, everything perspective. Because it's phenomenological, because it's about the here and now, there isn't really any sense there that the experiments or therapies are culturally biased. However, there is one element of that which is not quite true, because there is a lot of focus on affect, and it says there in the limitation, there's a lot of focus around emotion. And in the Asian cultures, because they are so kind of low in context, it's, there's communication is very much hidden. The feelings should be, kept quite private, and we sort of show a brave face, kind of, and this is of course stereotyping, but that's not what's needed here in Gestalt therapy. You need to actually emote. You need to be able to emote and be comfortable with, when I say emote, I mean express your emotions. And so perhaps that's a limitation within certain cultures. It does say Asian there, and that's quite stereotypical, and maybe, sort of in regards to, when this therapy was developed, that statement may have more relevance. But I think that nowadays, if we don't say, look, culturally, that's how that's how those people are, we can say there are certain cultures or parts of certain cultures which value emotional control. And those cultures or societies or communities or whatever you want to call them are going to find Gestalt therapy a little bit more difficult. So we're prohibiting to directly express the negative feelings. This is part of Asian culture business. It's prohibited, not prohibiting, to directly express the negative feelings to parents, and its ineffective therapists may manipulate the clients with powerful experiential work. Now that should have its own bullet point there, because that is a limitation. There is some very, very powerful experiential experiments which you can do, which do really influence clients. And I guess that there has to be, a level of self-awareness on the part of the therapist as to how much to push, how much to do, how much is appropriate for this particular client, because it can end up being quite manipulative. as with everything, the ethical position of the therapist has to be do no harm, beneficence, mainly those two there, and also self-care, because when you're not keeping those things in mind, you can get quite enthusiastic and maybe cause harm to the client. And also finally there, some people may need psychoeducation. So what does that mean? That means that people may not necessarily understand how to identify their angry part. If I said to you, identify the sad part of you or the worried part of you, are you easily able to do that? And it's assumed that you guys are getting psychoeducation. And so I think that is one of the major limitations, is that Gestalt therapy in and of itself as a therapy is really just, that process of applying experiments and techniques, but not really providing information. Yes, we want you to be self-aware, and we do these things like challenge you and provide you with experiments, but we don't really aim for you to understand yourself in a kind of psychological way. And so psychoeducation is all about how do you process information? What is your psyche? What is, what are your cognitions? What do they mean? How does it all interconnect? That's what psychoeducation is. So educating people about their own psychology, and Gestalt therapy doesn't have that. So in summary, the contributions, present-centered awareness, pay attention to verbal and non-verbal cues. I'm sorry, that contributions heading shouldn't be there because this is just a summary. It brings conflicts or struggles to the fore, so a person can experience their conflict and struggle. There's a focus on growth and enhancement, and we see each aspect, for example, of a dream as a protection of themselves, and there's an increased awareness of what is empirical validation for the effectiveness. So the empirical validation really is, I guess, in the moment. If you're able to experience it, then that you validate its effectiveness. If you're able to kind of move through the feeling that you were having, you're able to, or move through the unfinished business, that you were having, you're able to kind of say, well, it does work, and that validates it because it's right there in front of you, as opposed to, say, Freud, which you have to go for a long, long, long period of time, to peel away all the layers and peel away, the issues in order to be able to accept this final, kind of issue, if you ever get to it. And it's not as easy to validate. So that was, I believe that's the end. Yep, that was Gestalt therapy. In your tutorial, you may do an empty chair experiment for yourselves and maybe record it and upload it, or just discuss with your lecturer in regards to any of the techniques or experiments or any questions you may have in regard to Gestalt therapy. I think it's a really interesting one and good to contrast with other therapies. So I'll go now and see you next time for week 11. Take care.